Tell me, Joe, you couldn't have done all these things without the support of your wife, correct?
Well, yeah, she was a big part of it, being her support, allowing me to do this, travel away without her, time away from family, sometimes time away from business. You know, one story indicative of all that is that, you know, she had her 50th birthday coming up, and I had a party planned for her, a surprise party. Invites were out, place was booked. I get a call from the New York State Commissioner, Ron Stevens, to work at Madison Square Garden, which I had worked there before in the amateurs a couple of times, but this was my first pro opportunity to work there. And I just couldn't pass it up. So I said to her, you know, how would you like to go to New York for the weekend for your birthday? We'll go to a tavern on the Green for brunch. We'll go to some restaurants. She was all for it. She was excited. She didn't know I had a party booked and canceled already. So I knew she wasn't going to go to the fight because she didn't want it. So I invited another couple to come with us. The guy came to the fights. I got him a ticket. She went out to dinner that night with her friend. But we made a nice, you know, weekend in New York with her best friends, so it turned out really good. But yeah, you know, what somebody else might not have wanted to allow me to do that. It was right on her birthday. Yeah. But you know, yes, so many other things too. I've traveled to do all over the country doing the national tournaments, gone a week, you know, at a time, and at my own expenses. Amateurs don't pay you for that stuff.
Yeah. But, you had a 20-year period. 20-year period where you were either an amateur ref or a professional ref continuously year after year. Then you had some time away, and you've come back to amateur refereeing. You've authored a book called Uppercuts. You were in the film The Featherweight. Now you're about to be inducted into the Connecticut Boxing Hall of Fame. Joe, what does this mean to you?
It means everything. I mean, starting with the movie, for instance, you know, what a thrill that was. I had known Willie Pep quite a few. I went to his 75th birthday party himself, and now I'm 75. I thought he was an old man when I went to his birthday party. But I met him when I was a kid, and he was long gone, you know, still a childhood idol of mine. And then I got a call from the production company that they'd already were looking for a couple of different referees, and they wanted to use professional referees. They weren't looking for actors. My name came up, and I took it, and just to been a part of that. You know, my wife and I went to the premiere at the theater in Hartford. I forget the name of the theater.
I forget.
Yeah.
The nicest theater in Hartford. I know.
Great theater too.
Yeah. Yeah. What was that experience like, going to this great premiere and you're in the movie?
Yeah, you know, it's just great to, you know, see myself on the big screen with my wife sitting there, and it was a short part, but it, you know, it was a close-up part, filled the screen up. It was great, and then, you know, I included a little chapter of that in my book as I was writing the book about that, because I experienced a day on the set and with an actor who was as passionate about Willie Pep as I was. So we spent some time talking. You know, he wanted to hear the stories I had about Willie. He was happy that I had actually known Willie Pep, because he didn't, and he was also a hero of his. So that was all a great experience. And then, you know, to get the book published and to get it out there, you know, it wasn't about book sales. I'm an independent book author. I don't expect this book to sell more than 100 copies in its whole lifetime, so it's not about that either. It's about, I'm just proud of it. You know, I think it's entertaining. I read a lot. I read a lot of boxing books. I read everything from Mark Allen Baker, who's the premier historian as far as I'm concerned. And to be a part of the Boxing Hall of Fame to be in with such esteemed people like Mark Allen Baker and John Scully and Willie Pep, and we have such a great history in Connecticut. It's amazing that we have the history we have. Battolino, I mean, we can go. How many people are connected to Connecticut that Marlon Starling should definitely be in the International Hall of Fame. And it's good to see that we're also recognizing the New Englanders who have had a big part of boxing history in Connecticut that are getting inducted this year too. And in years past, I had the privilege of refereeing Scott Pemberton, and he was a warrior. And I refereed him in a title bout at Foxwoods, and that was a highlight for me. It was, I knew what I was going into in that fight. You probably followed his career and seen what he brought to the table. All excitement.
So to be in with these guys, to go in with this class, I mean... Yeah,
it's a great class to be going into. And Peter Manfredo Sr., I go back with him a bit, and my wife knows nothing about boxing. She has one favorite boxer, and that's Peter Manfredo Jr. And that's because of the Contender series. We watch that a lot.
She'll probably see Peter Jr. when you get inducted.
Yes, and actually we have pictures together with Peter Jr. At Peter's induction, when Peter was inducted. There was one of the only inductions my wife ever came to, and she went to that because of Peter.
Long time ago. I didn't know she didn't go to every one. I remember taking a picture of you and your wife in the induction.
Yeah, probably. I got a lot of pictures, and you probably took them all. I mean, with Scully and her, and Pemberton and her, and she, but she didn't know who anybody was. But as soon as she knew who Peter Manfredo was,
And Joe, there's a lot that goes into refereeing. Tell us what the hardest part about it is.
I think the main thing is you always need to stay focused on why you're in there. You're in there to protect the weaker boxer. If you lose focus of that, then you're just on an ego trip, and you're not going to be an effective referee because others notice, commissioners notice. That's your main thing. So throughout, it's just a different standard when you're doing amateurs and you're doing kids and you're doing professionals of where their level of experience will allow you to let that develop. But you have to be in shape, you have to move around, you have to attend the seminars and the clinics, and they're very good about that. They have a lot of mandatory seminars and clinics, and you're working with some of the best officials and all of the best officials in the country at these clinics. And you pay attention, you do what you got to do, you learn. You do it. Now in between, because sometimes you don't get assignments as quickly as you'd like. I knew I'd never like to go more than 3 months without an assignment. So I would get in the ring in the local boxing gyms and referee sparring sessions. And basically with that, they benefit too, because a lot of boxers don't know the rules. And so, I've seen boxers in sparring sessions that their main punch might be a nice hook to the belt line, and in sparring they're going a little low, and I'm calling them on it, and they're looking at me like, this is a sparring session. You learn where the belt line is, okay, because you're going to get called on it. So there's a benefit to having a referee in the ring. And I've done some wars. One of the biggest war I ever did in a sparring session was Peter Manfredo Jr. and Elvin Ayala in Boxing and Faith Gym on Grand Avenue a number of years ago. They were both a couple of weeks out from their own individual pro fights that they had, and I had a fight coming up, so we all wanted to work, but they did 10 rounds solid. It was good.
Did any call you ever made put you in danger with a corner, with fans?
No, not that I could think of put me in danger. A lot of calls certainly that they didn't like. I stand by all the calls I've made. It's anything that stands out with me that I would have done differently, I don't know. It doesn't stand out in my mind that I would have done something differently. But
so that's interesting, though. Nothing in your mind or your history where you maybe thought back and said, I wish I had done that differently? You don't have any regrets, huh?
Not really. I have seen, I've had a couple of bouts here and there where, a fighter goes down from a punch that wasn't so hard, and it might have been a slip, but the punch landed, and you had to make that call, and I might have called it as a landed blow, legal punch. And I may have liked to have seen that again on an instant replay, and never got the opportunity in some instances to see that on an instant replay. And if I got some support from my fellow officials, so a lot of times it would be that was a legitimate knockdown. That was a good call. That felt good, because there might have been that little bit of doubt in your mind when you came out of the ring. You might have even asked the judge, did you see that? Was that a legitimate knockdown? Or did he slip? The headbutt call, that's one of the hardest, to call. They might be inside, and that's one of the biggest adjustments for an amateur referee to make when he turns pro, because there's no more headgear. So now you're going to see some accidental and intentional headbutting going on. That's going to cause damage that didn't in the amateurs. You never dealt with that in the amateurs. So that's a big adjustment. But when they are in punching and exchanging hard, and somebody comes out of it with a cut, and you got to make that call, you might not be on an HBO where they got instant replays to show. You might be on a club show where you don't have that. So you're going to make that call. It's a hard call to make. It's a hard call to make. So as the referee, if you didn't see the headbutt, it was a punch, okay? That's what you have to go by, okay? To call it a headbutt, you have to see that.
Yeah.
Now, later on, you may have come out of the ring and asked again to one of your officials. Now, I've seen some of them on instant replay that did take place in some of my televised bouts, but there were a lot of bouts I didn't do that weren't televised, and of course you would have liked to see that again.
And fighters get nervous. As a referee, did you get nervous?
All the time, until the bell rang, but then it just left me.
Yeah.
Just left me completely.
Were you afraid of making a mistake? Was that the nervousness, or where did the nervousness come from?
Well, the first thing is you want to do your job, protect that fighter. The worst thing you want to ever happen, it's a hurting game. We know the hurt that goes on in that ring. You're not going to prevent that. It's the unnecessary hurt. The punches that take place after a fighter should have been stopped. You have to know that threshold. You work with other referees, you work with doctors at the clinics on where all this is and what to look for. You're looking at the legs to see if there's a little buckle in the knees and all that. Very serious to let somebody go too far. And that's where your mindset is. Please don't let somebody die on my watch. I've had fighters get. I've made a couple of highlights. I made ESPN's top 5 sports moments of the week twice. One of them was the quickest knockout, I think, in boxing history, because it only took 2 seconds. And it took place because the 2 fighters came to the center of the ring. I gave them their instructions. And basically, I used to keep it simple. I would say, I went over the instructions with you in the dressing room. I want you to obey my commands at all times. I want you to protect yourself at all times. Touch gloves now. When the bells ring, come out and give me a good, clean fight. That was what I would say. Okay. So the touched gloves. They went back to the corner. The bell rang. One guy went to touch gloves again. The other one came over the top with a right hand, knocked him out cold. Cold. As soon as he went down, I knew he was out. There was no call. I think I went to 2. 1, 2, out, Doc, get in the ring. I seen that guy go off in a stretcher to the hospital. Last fight of the night. I have no idea what kind of condition this guy is in. The next morning I called, to find out how he was in. He was actually released that night.
Oh, that's
he
good.
was admitted for observation and he was released. But that stayed with me all night long. Now, there was certainly nothing I could have done.
Yeah.
You know, it was a legal punch, although the crowd went nuts. They didn't like the sportsmanship aspect of it.
Even though you didn't do anything wrong, it weighed on your mind, correct?
Well, it didn't weigh on my mind as far as guilt goes. It weighed on my mind what his health condition might be. You know, that would happen to me no matter what. You know, that fighter's health would have been my main concern. So that was on my mind. There was no guilt there. I didn't do anything. It was a boom, one punch. But I had to declare who the winner was. Now, the crowd is actually thinking that the other guy is the winner because they don't know boxing rules. They think it was an illegal punch. It wasn't an illegal punch. It wasn't supposed to reach out and touch gloves. You're supposed to protect yourself at all times.
Right.
So he won by a knockout that was about 2 seconds long.
That was kind of a crazy moment in the ring. Was there another crazy moment that stands out in your on your resume?
Well, again, another one of those top 5 sports moments of the week. And the weird thing is, on both of them, I beat out Sammy Sosa. Sammy Sosa for hitting like his 70th home run one time, and Sammy Sosa for his broken bat where he had the leaded bat.
Yeah.
That night, I did a bout that was on ESPN. It was Aaron Williams. If you remember him, he was very good, talented fighter. And he sent his fighter through a combination of punches really quickly through the ropes. And there's a cruiserweight going down head first through the ropes, and I scale across the ring and I grab him by the arms, his outstretched arms, and now he's like this. Another second, he's going to hit head first on the concrete, and I grabbed him and able to pull him back into the ring, and that made the top 10 sports moment of the week.
And that's a nice highlight for a referee.
Yeah, I got 2 of them.
Yeah. Tell me, you became an author late in life, late in your career. How proud are you of that? I mean, that's something you probably never foresaw until when?
Well, I respect what you do as a writer because I enjoyed reading, and I've written some short boxing articles that were published many, many, many years ago, and so I appreciate that. And when my career was developing, I would keep some stories going, So when I got to wanting to put it all together, I wrote a book that's a fictional tapestry of my career through boxing. A lot of the stories have a lot of truth to them. So that's why I call it faction, because there's some faction there. Yeah. But it is fictional count. I'm a barber for 50 years, so that had a lot to do with why I wanted to get this book out this year. This is my 50th year as a barber, my 32nd year in boxing.
Oh, wow.
And so thus the book cover with the barber poles around the boxing ring.
And tell us, the lead character in the book is sort of a fictional character, but he's based on your life a lot. Some things are factual, some things are fiction. How did you decide to set it up that way?
Because I didn't know. At first I wanted to write a factual memoir, but it wasn't as entertaining as I wanted it to be. My career was something I'm very proud of, but Tony, my fictional alter ego, his career is as a world-class Hall of Fame boxing referee, inducted into the International Boxing Hall of Fame, and I made it very entertaining. I made all my stories very entertaining. There's an element of truth in them all, but the journey of me going through the amateurs and the pros and the people along the way, and a lot of first names of people that you would recognize who have been important in my life, in my journey. And I wanted to make it entertaining, and I think it's pretty entertaining. I got some great reviews. I've got some good reviews printed on the back by some very boxing notable people who enjoyed it. So it's just something I'm proud to have accomplished and had it done. And I have no illusions about it. It won't sell 100 copies in its whole life. But I am writing a sequel, and I'm partway through it. And basically, I'm taking something, in about another 7 or 8 months, I'm hoping to take that into publication.
Though you're humble about how many sales this book will have, what if some movie director
wouldn't that be great?
gets his hands on this book,
Yeah, who
or
would play
the next
me?
one, or the next book, and decides to turn it into a movie or a series?
I tell you, I think it's good enough for that.
Yeah.
But it would. What's the likelihood it would get that kind of exposure to the right person
Hey,
to
you never
make
know.
that happen?
You never know, Joe.
I know you never know. That's how
something under the radar could get seen by a bigwig. You know?
it could happen. But that's not my illusion. It's not even there in the thought process. But as we talked, a lot of things happened in my life that weren't in the thought process.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, a few years ago, you never thought you'd be in a movie, correct?
exactly. So yes, but I have gotten a sequel coming out where I'm taking the other characters that are in this book, and to focus is going to be more on some of the other characters, not so much on Tony.
But you're a great example that late in life or later in life,
yeah, and you know what? I kind of want that theme to be
you can change
the theme.
or take a different course.
Yeah, I kind of want that to be the theme too. In the books, both books, is to address elderly people who still have some thoughts of what they can do with their life. I'm elderly now. I was midlife when I went through these experiences. So I'm reminiscing on them, but I'm still doing some of this stuff. I'm still in the amateurs refereeing. I'm out there, I'm doing it. I'm doing it because I still think I offer a lot to the program. I volunteer my time. I don't get paid, as you know. But it keeps me fit, keeps me with a motive to go out and walk 5 miles, that I want to stay in shape so I can do this and look good in the ring. It's always been important to me. You know, every referee I worked with brought something to the table. Arthur Mercanti, one of the best, but Arthur Mercanti was a stickler on aesthetics. You had to look the part. You had to be neatly dressed. You had to be professional. Everything about you had to be professional. You had to show up on time. You had to be professional. That's a part of me that has always been there. Frank Cappuccino was great at ring instructions in the dressing room. Taught me, and I address some of these things in the book. He taught me in dressing room instructions. You gain control in this dressing room. Those fighters are going to learn to respect you here, not in the ring. So when you get to the ring, you already want their respect. You come across in that dressing room like you're a nervous wreck going into this, you're anxiety-ridden, whatever, you're incapable. That's what you're going to have to deal with when that fight starts. And Frank had that great dressing room presence. And he had a great presence in the ring. But that dressing room is what I got from him. Danny Schiavone, it's just intense focus, you know. It gets into his zone and gets his job done. I got something from everybody.
And what did you get from Dick Flaherty?
Dick Flaherty is, you know, he had a way about him to where he certainly had respect, but he had a way about him of controlling that ring without a lot of movement. That's where I was younger, he was older. So as I would look at him and I would look at the older referee and I'd say, you know, when I get older, I got to learn how to move around the ring like this guy who is always in position, because he knows how to work the corners. You know, he'll work a corner, do his little figure 8, might get over to the other corner, do his little figure 8, and all the while, he's not overly exerting himself. So I could see him doing those 12 rounders back to back. And
so you were observing this as a midlife man, this senior, I guess he may have been a senior by then already, right? You were like you said, you were midlife then, or a younger man then, and you were observing this and taking note of this, right?
Yes.
You were.
Of all those great referees, because all those great referees, I watched them work before I was working. They were my fans. They were my heroes. I was watching them refereeing on television, and now I'm their colleagues. You know, I refereed with Steve Smoger on my first night. You know, Steve gave him. Sometimes all they got to do is give you a compliment. You know, that does for you. When a referee like Steve Smoker says to me, "You did a great job. How long you been doing this?" You know, I like the way you move in the ring. You know, that's a great thing. And when I was an amateur, and I had a guy like Johnny Duke tell me that I was a very good referee, and he was liking what he was seeing. You know what that means to a young referee?
Like, you had so many great moments you were proud of, and for different things or for different reasons. But what is your number one highlight moment of your career to you personally, for whatever reason?
I think that the bout when I had with Scott Pemberton stands out really good. It was an action-packed bout. A lot of great fights. I did that. But Scott Pemberton, I went into that bout knowing his, his modus operandi. You know how he works. He was a warrior. I've seen his fights, and I wanted to go in and allow him to do his thing. You know, I know that certain fighters, they'll take a lot of punishment, but they're not done. You know, look at Gaddy. Look at Marvin Johnson back in the day. Who else was the light heavyweight back in the day? Matthew Franklin, Matthew Saad Muhammad.
Yeah.
You know, if you went into those bouts and you didn't respect that these guys are supermen and warriors and can take a threshold of punishment, you have to give them that benefit, but you have to also know where is that balance line, that threshold. It can be dangerous because they're not your average athlete, you know. And I knew that Pemberton might get himself in some trouble in that bout, but he would come back, and I was deeply monitored into that.
You remember who his opponent was?
Levon Easley.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
It was their second bout. This was their rematch. And
highlight.
And their first fight I had watched to study that, and that was a war too. All his fights were wars.
Yeah.
You got to remember the ones with Omar Shika.
Oh yeah. Those are his biggest fights. You were also a pro judge for 5 years.
Yes.
Tell us how different an experience that was.
Yeah, you know what? I gained a whole new respect for judges. You know, one of the best judges I've ever seen was Don Trella. I worked with Don in the amateurs. I was the chief of officials when he came on board, and I saw his talent, and I took him to a national PAL tournament, and at that point I had been around a bit, so some of the national officials knew who I was. And I had worked a lot with Don and introduced him to a lot of people. And at the end of the tournament, you would get awards presented to the best judges. Don Trella didn't miss a round in that whole tournament, and yet he did not get the judges award for the tournament. And I went to battle for him, but you know, his politics reared its ugly head. But I remember one bout when he and I were watching, and through the tournament, and it was Tiger Allen against Andre Durrell, and I forgot how that ended. Durrell won, but I was a Tiger Allen fan, and I had a personal bet with Trella afterwards. You know, after the tournament was over, that he would have a better career than Durrell would, but it didn't turn out that way. Durrell came out of that tournament and went on and became world champion. But Trella was a great judge. So when I became a judge, I judged in the amateurs, but I didn't judge in the pros. And then when I left the pro refereeing, I knew it was time for me to do so. Plus I wanted to do everything in boxing. So at this point I refereed pro for 13 years. And I requested my judge's license. I knew it was time. And yet I gained a whole new respect because the focus is very, very different. A really intense focus. These guys don't blink. And, you know, sometimes a round could be decided by just a jab. You know, some things you have to pick. You don't want to come up with draws, but sometimes you got no choice but to score around the draw. But you really got to look for something there, because you know what the judging criteria is, and you might have to go back to ring generalship to decide who won that round. You know, certainly as a judge, we don't like the fouls. You know, we don't like that kind of fighter that's may even be getting away with some of it because the referee's not seeing it, but sometimes the judges see it because it happens right in front of them. But again, you know, you have your own different responsibilities as a judge. I gained a whole different respect for the judges, you know, and the whole boxing family. I always felt like a brotherhood to me. We all had each other's back.
On October
we knew how hard
18th,
it was what we're doing.
On October 18th, you're going to be enshrined in the Connecticut Boxing Hall of Fame. And long after you're gone, when your plaque is hanging up at Mohegan Sun, how do you want to be remembered?
I just, you know, I got children. I got kids. They're adult kids. They got their own goals, you know. I just want them to see me up there getting that award and knowing that they still got a whole life ahead of them. What I'm getting awards for didn't happen to me until I was well into my 40s and started in my 50s and my 60s and my 70s. This is when I was doing those things. You guys are in your 30s, you know. Your whole world's in front of you. I got a son who's a DJ who would like to be on a whole other level than he is with his DJing. It's not over. You could get there. That's where you want to be. Go for it, you know. Sometimes it just takes luck too, but luck and opportunity is taking advantage of that. When opportunity comes along, that might have been a little bit of luck that it came along, but now you got to take advantage. How many people don't take advantage when that happens to them? You know,
That's the lesson you want.
I've walked into situations where I went to judge in some of the, you know, they weren't all glamorous venues. Some of them were pretty scary. But, and in neighborhoods that, you know, half the fighters were from that neighborhood, the other half the fighters were from North Carolina, you know, and you're in the Bronx. So, you know, it can be intimidating. And you might be intimidated a bit going into it, but that can't enter. That does not enter your mindset when that bell rings. It cannot enter the mindset. You might hope going in that the North Carolina fighter, you know, or the Bronx fighter doesn't foul the North Carolina fighter and you got to disqualify him from his hometown gym. But if it happens, you got to do it.
True.
And I've been there. And, you know, those are such great memories to me now that I've been there. I've had friends that wouldn't come with me to some of the fights I went to that I had a bit. No, I don't want to go there. But
you were never afraid. I mean,
no, never. You know, sometimes walk into your car at the end of the night, especially my car, it says pro ref on the license plate.
I remember going to fights in the Bronx and having to walk a few blocks back to the garage.
Yeah. But Little League baseball's more dangerous. You know, the fans in the stands get more fights than Little League baseball. I go to amateur boxing shows. You probably have been to many. You know, they're small venues, hardcore fans, loud, real loud. And I have never, only once, seen the trouble at an amateur boxing show. Only once. And that was pretty serious. But no, more than once. Now that I think about it. But for the most part, not like a Little League game.